Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Financial Edition. And today we are continuing our reading of The Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave. This book was inspired by all the current events that are happening in the precious metal world. And I thought it would be a good reading for a little history lesson, if you will, on gold and maybe precious metals in general. So anyways, this book I had in my shelf for a while and I think I started reading it, but it would be nice to reread it and to read it all the way through with you guys. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. I want to welcome the new members, new people, new viewers, and returning viewers. Welcome also. If you like what we do here, consider checking out our other book clubs. We have a spiritual book clubs on Mondays and health book clubs on Wednesdays. And we put all the books that we've read in the past, our past books as well as current books on YouTube. So we have it on a playlist and you guys can download it, listen to it when you're, in traffic, walking your dog, multitasking, whatever it is. And yeah, consider checking out our YouTube channel and like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. And we have other things on there as well, not just book clubs. So please check it out there. And if you have a book you want to recommend for us to read, I will leave a link in the description box below. And it could be a spiritual book, it could be a health book, it could be a financial book. We'd love to consider it and we'd love to hear from you. Um, and then you can also consider signing up for our free monthly newsletter. And if you want to support us further, you can buy me a coffee, leave a donation. Check out our merch section on our shop tab on our website. And also, if you are in the Los Angeles area or visiting LA, please consider, come join us and in our healing center. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healing for both domestic cats and dogs and humans. So you could read all about that technology on our website as well as our other services as well. And we'd love to hear from you and we'd love to meet you and get to know you. So this is chapter one, and this will be part two. Now, this book has a lot of endnotes in the back, and they have a lot of references and sometimes a lot of backstories, like paragraphs of backstories that they probably didn't put in the main chapter. So what I'll do is I'll read a page in the main chapter or a section, and then I'll read the endnotes in the back. Um, so that's what I'm going to do here. So I will move the camera in a little bit. If you have a book, you can follow with us there. If not, you can follow with us here on camera. Okay. And this book, I'm enjoying it so far. It reads almost like a Hollywood movie script. So be very interesting. Okay, here we go. Having humiliated Manchu China, Japan felt ready to take on Tsarist Russia, which was building railroads into Manchuria. On February 8, 1904, Japan launched two more surprise attacks. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So, Japan launched two more surprise attacks, one on the Russian naval base at Vladivostok, sorry, butchered that word, another on two Russian warships in the mouth of Korea's Incheon harbor. In reply, the Tsar sent his Baltic fleet halfway around the world, only to see it destroyed by Japan's navy in the Battle of Tsushima in May 1905. As China had done, Russia sued for peace, giving Japan the lower half of Sakhalin Island, transferring to Japan its lease on South Manchuria, and giving Japan control over the southern section of its Manchurian railway between Port Arthur and Changdun. Changchun. Now feeling invincible, Japan formally declared Korea a colony. Nobody asked Koreans what they thought. Western governments did not protest. Great numbers of Japanese arrived in the peninsula to make their fortunes. With them came legions of agents for the great Zabatsu conglomerates, seizing every commercial opportunity, every natural resource. Japan took control of law and order, creating new police and secret police networks. No longer making any pretense of chivalry, Japanese abused Korean sovereignty at every turn, crushing all resistance. A newspaper editor was arrested when he wrote, quote, "Ah, how wretched it is. Our 20 million countrymen have become the slaves of another country." End quote. Not all Japanese were predators. Some earnestly believed that they were in Korea to help, not to plunder. Ito Hirobumi told Korean officials, quote, "Your country does not have the power to defend itself. I am not insisting that your country commit suicide. I expect that if you thrust forward boldly, the day will come when you will advance to a position of equality with us, and we will cooperate with one another." End quote. The appointment of Ito as the first Japanese viceroy of Korea gave the country some hope of rational government, but General Yamagata saw to it that Ito's staff included Black Dragon boss Uchida Ryohei. Secretly financed from army funds, Uchida's thugs went on a rampage, murdering 18,000 Koreans during Ito's time as viceroy. Disgusted by the bloody meddling, Ito resigned in 1909, only to be shot dead by paid assassins. His murder was used as a pretext to demand full annexation of Korea. On August 22nd, 1910, Korea ceased to be a mere colony and was fully incorporated into Japanese territory. Japan's army now had its own domain on the Asian mainland, free of interference from Tokyo politicians. One of Yamagata's more rabid followers, General Terauchi Masatake, was appointed first Governor General of Korea. Terauchi, who had lost his right hand during a great samurai rebellion in the 1870s, had been army minister during the Russo-Japanese War. He now supervised the looting and plunder of Korea. Although some Japanese army officers were chivalrous, showed mercy, or refused to indulge in wanton killing, Terauchi was extraordinarily brutal, setting a precedent for Japanese behavior in all the countries it would occupy over coming decades. Determined to crush all resistance, he told Koreans, quote, "I will whip you with scorpions," end quote. He set up a sadistic police force of Korean yakuza, ordering it to use torture as a matter of course. For, quote, "No Oriental can be expected to tell the truth except under torture," end quote. These police were closely supervised by Japan's Gestapo, the Kempeitai. Most Kempeitai agents wore civilian clothes, identified only by the chrysanthemum crest on the underside of a lapel. Eventually, Japan spawned a network of these spies, informants, and terrorists throughout Asia. At the height of World War II, 35,000 official Kempeitai were deployed throughout the Japanese Empire. The unofficial number was far greater because of close integration with Black Dragon. Black Ocean, the other fanatical sects, working together like teeth and lips. Black Ocean boss Uchida reviewed all appointments of Kempeitai officers sent to Korea. Okay, let's see what kind of endnote we have there. Let's see where we left off here. Okay. I think we read chapter 18. Yeah, okay. So we'll go up to 18 here. Okay. So in page 7, we have 1894 to 95, which is the Sino-Russian War. Japan's victory brought unexpected dividends. The Chinese indemnity, $150 million paid in gold bullion, enabled Japan to go on the gold standard. Roberts, Mitsui, page 148, Tamaki, Japanese Banking, page, I think that's 15, if I remember my Roman numerals. Also, Checkland Pacific Banking, Chapter 1. Also on page 17, February 4, 1904, war was declared 6 days later. That was from Roberts, Mitsui, page 156, and Deuce, Abacus, and Sword, page 180. In Japan's gains from the Sino-Russian War, we could find that in Roberts, Mitsui, page 180, 162. Now on page 18, about Japan's annexation of Korea in 1910, was the result of two interlinked processes, the political process entailed control over the Korean state, the economic, oops, okay, sorry about that. The economic process entailed penetration of the Korean market by Japanese traders, sojourners, and settlers. That was from Deuce, Abacus, and Sword, page 23. The author uses a lot of Abacus and Sword. That might be an interesting book if any one of you want to do a deeper rabbit hole dive. That might be the other book to read, huh? Okay, on page 18, we have Korea, a secret police state under Japan. That was from Deuce, Abacus, and Sword, page 186. And the quote about, how wretched, blah, blah, blah. That's from Deuce, Abacus, and Sword, page 195. And Ito Hirobumi's quote, that was from Deuce, Abacus, and Sword, page 190. The thing about fully incorporated, Japan justified the annexation of Korea because, quote, the existing system of Japan of government in Korea has not proved entirely equal to the duty of preserving public order and tranquility, end quote. And that's from Deuce, Abacus, and Sword, page 338. The treaty of the annexation is available online at the USC-UCLA Joint East Asian Studies Center at isop.ucla.edu/EAS/KORE1910.htm. The incident about crushing all resistance, the elimination of all anti-Japanese activities and activists is from Kodansha Encyclopedia of Japan, Volume 8, page 12. The quote about scorpions, it's from Low, Origins of the Korean War, page 4. And the quote about torture was a matter of course was from Low, Origins, page 10. The common forms of torture employed by the Kapitai were described in a 1928 report contained in Lamont Brown Kapitai, page 19. The thing about chrysanthemum crest, Kapitai plainclothes men with a chrysanthemum crest pin hidden under their jacket lapels. You can find that in Lamont Brown Kapitai, page 34. And then, okay. So the 35,000 Kapitai at the height of the Pacific War, that was from Lamont Brown Kapitai, page 17, and also page 34. The thing about Black Ocean, Kapitai, Lamont Brown, Kapitai, page 24. Kempeitai schools were in Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore, and Manila. Training included espionage, explosives, fifth column organization. I don't know what that means. Those of you with maybe law enforcement background, if anyone knows what that means, leave a comment in the comment below. I'd be interested to know. Code breaking, burglary, disguise, and torture. Foreign language study was downplayed, so in the field of Kampatai, officers used interpreters. 40 Japanese Army Handbook, page 236. The thing about Black Ocean appointments of Kampatai Lamont can be found in Lamont Brown, Kampatai, page 74. I don't think we read that yet, but I'm going to go ahead and read the last three footnotes or endnotes on page 18, and then we'll read that in the chapter. So here we have the arrest of Koreans in 1912 and 1918. That was from Cummings, Korea's Place, page 147. Thing about Japanese school teachers in uniform, it's also from Cummings, Korea Place, page 152. And then the comment about rice and police can be found in Cummings, Korea's Place, at page 152. Okay. So now, Korean resistance was intense but futile. In 1912, some 50,000 Koreans were arrested. By 1918, the number arrested annually rose to 140,000. During Korea's first 10 years of Japan's rule, even Japanese school teachers wore uniforms and carried swords. Japan's army stood guard while Kampantai and Black Ocean thugs pillaged the peninsula. Japanese police controlled rice production from paddy field to storehouse so the majority could be shipped to Japan. Yakuza were expert at extortion. In Japan, they used intimidation, extortion, kidnapping, and murder, restrained only by prudence in selecting the victims. On the mainland, there was no need for such restraint. Because Terauchi's style was so brutal, Japanese bankers and businessmen made a public display of showing contempt for mercy. Eventually, the Terauchi style spread across Asia, remaining in place until 1945. To be sure, Japan did modernize Korean industry to some extent, but at terrible cost. Korean workers were paid one-fourth the wages of Japanese counterparts in the same factories. Terauchi forced Koreans to eat millet, while their rice was sent to Japan. In this merciless way, the peninsula was stripped of everything from artworks to root vegetables. As Korea now belonged to Japan, the transfer of cultural property, looting, was not theft. How can you steal something that already belongs to you? First on the wish list was Korea's famous Celadon porcelain, which many thought surpassed China's Tang porcelain. Korean stoneware was distinctive for its translucent blue-green glaze, with floral designs incised in the clay and filled with color before glazing. A Western expert called it, quote, the most gracious and unaffected pottery ever made, end quote. Although Japan had kidnapped Korea's Celadon masters in the 6th century, and these experts had discovered sources of fine clay in Kyushu, the porcelain they made in Japan was not the same, spiritually. Japanese valued Korean Celadon above all others for ritual purposes and tea ceremony. Coveted also were examples of Korea's Ponchong stoneware and Choson white porcelain. Some of this plunder was put on display at Tokyo's Ueno Museum. Most ended up in private Japanese collections where it was never on public view and rarely was seen even in private. Japanese collectors keep the treasures in vaults, taking single pieces out for personal viewing. So most of Korea's stolen antiquities remain lost from sight to this day. When all Korea's private collections were confiscated, Experts studying court records and ancient manuscripts determined that the finest Celadons still slept in the tombs of kings. To disguise the looting of these tombs, Terrucci introduced laws for the quote, preservation of historic sites. By preservation, he meant that the tombs be looted and the valuable contents preserved in Japan. He then opened some 2,000 tombs, including a royal tomb in Kaesong, which were emptied of their ancient celadons, Buddhist images, crowns, necklaces, earrings, bronze mirrors, and other ornamental treasures. Along the Taedong River near Pyongyang, some 1,400 tombs were opened and looted. This wholesale theft was overseen by General Terrucci personally. One of his first acts was to destroy the 4,000-room Queen Bokong Palace to make way for the construction of a residence for himself. To decorate his personal quarters, he chose 600 artworks from thousands being prepared for shipment to Japan. Japanese private collectors and antique dealers carried off not only artworks, but classic literary texts and important national archives, all in the name of academic research at Japanese museums and universities. Tens of thousands of the finest books listed as Korean national treasures, including all 1,800 volumes of the Ri Dynasty archives, were shipped to Japan. Scholars say some 200,000 volumes of ancient books of lesser distinction were then burned as part of a deliberate program to erase Korea's distinctive culture. They list more than 42,000 cultural relics, including ancient manuscripts taken to Japan for study and never returned. For good measure, the Japanese used dynamite to blow up a monument to King Taeho. 1396 to 1398, and a monument to Samyong, a militant Buddhist priest who led the resistance to Japan's samurai invasion in 1592. Okay, so let's see. Maybe I'll read the rest of this page and then we'll read the end note. Okay, quote, Japan's aim, said Korean historian Yi Ki-baek, was to eradicate consciousness of Korean national identity, roots and all, and thus to obliterate the very existence of the Korean people from the face of the earth, end quote. Once stripped of their heritage and identity, Koreans were to be made over into second-class Japanese. Divested of their inherited land, they had their names changed to Japanese names and were forced to adopt Shinto in place of their own Buddhist, Confucian, or Christian beliefs. Japan's emperor would be their only god, and only Korean who refused to acknowledge, or any Korean who refused to acknowledge his divinity was arrested. Temples were looted of bronze bells and Buddhist statuary. Even ordinary religious metalwork was removed and melted down for weapons as, quote, spiritual corporation behind the guns, end quote. Koreans were to speak only Japanese. Korean language newspapers were closed. Political parties disbanded. Korean writers would only publish in Japanese, and all schools taught only in Japanese. At home, Koreans were expected to speak Japanese to each other. In 1907, Tokyo forced King Kojong to abdicate in favor of his retarded 10-year-old son. They styled the boy, quote, Crown Prince Imperial Yi-un, and sent him off to Tokyo, claiming he would be educated side by side with Meiji's grandsons, Princes Hirohito, Chichibu, and Takamatsu. In truth, the boy was a hostage whose survival depended on continued cooperation by Korea's royal family. For some reason, Emperor Meiji found the boy sympathetic and lavished attention and gifts on him, the sort of attention or the sort of affection he never demonstrated toward his own grandsons. The boy was easily persuaded to sign away his claim to the Korean throne. In subsequent decades, thousands of other Korean cultural artifacts were forcibly removed by Japan and never returned, despite promises. When people are so thoroughly terrorized, it is impossible to come forward later with a precise list of what was stolen or a stack of receipts. In 1965, the South Korean government demanded the return of 4,479 items that it was able to identify individually. Of course, Japan grudgingly returned only 1,432, taking another 30 years to do so. The great mass of Korean culture treasure remains in Japan to this day, in private collections, museums, and the vaults of the imperial family. Much of this patrimony is beyond price. Here alone is evidence that Japan was far from bankrupt at the end of World War II. There always are collaborators. Over 40 years, a Japanese antique dealer named Nakata amassed a fortune looting and exporting ancient Koryo celadons. His partner was a former high official in the Ri dynasty who also became a millionaire. Most Korean landowners were stripped of their estates and agricultural properties, which were snapped up by Japanese developers. One developer acquired over 300,000 acres in Korea, where he intended to settle Japanese immigrants. As tenant farmers lost their land, they and the suburban poor were rounded up and shipped off as slave labor to work in mines and construction brigades in Japan or in the desolate Kuril Islands. 60,000 Koreans were forced to toil as slave labor in coal mines and military factories in the Sakhalin Peninsula of Siberia. Of these, 43,000 were still in Sakhalin at the end of World War II when they came under Soviet control and had great difficulty getting home. Okay, let's read some of the endnotes in the back there. Okay, so let's see. We read up to page 20. Let's see here. Oops, excuse me there. Okay. All right, sorry about that, Han. Okay, let's start with page 19. The thing about one-fourth Korean Japanese wage disparities, you find that in Cummings, Korea's Place, page 168 and 1 to 169. The thing about porcelain, you can find in William B. Honey quoted in Cummings, Korea's Place, page 42. Thing about Korean celadon, you can find that in Cummings, Korea's Place, page 42. The note about Tokyo Art Museum catalog for an exhibition of 152 Korean treasures. You find that in Masterpieces in Koryo and Choson ceramics, held at Japan's Tokyo Art Museum from September to November 1992. The thing about Korean royal tombs looted, C. Kim Ji-ho, Korean Central News Agency, NK raises stolen cultural asset issue in talks with Japan. That'll be North Korea raises stolen cultural asset issue in talks with Japan. You could find that in Korean Central News Agency, April 10, 2000. Japan urged to own its responsibility. KCNA, April 27, 2000 online. The thing about wholesale theft, Young Sung Jun, Kankuk Kilbo, sorry, butchered that word, October 21, 1998. Special exhibit commemorates 60th anniversary of Kansong Museum online. UNESCO's World Heritage List, Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict, 1984. Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property, 1970. Convention for the Protection of the World Cultural and Natural Heritage, 1972. Japan has refused to sign United Nations. conventions that would force her to repatriate looted cultural properties taken from Asia between 1910 to 1945. See also Kim Yong-mok, Whither Japan-Korea Relations, Japan Policy Research Institute Critique, Volume 5, Number 9, October 1998, available at the JPRI website. The thing about classic literary texts, finest books, see above articles from the Korean Central News Agency. And the thing about Prince Yi-un, you could find that in Cummings, Korea's Place in the Sun, page 145, and Bix, Hirohito and the Making of Modern Japan, page 34 and 35. Yi was married to Princess Masako, once frontrunner to become Hirohito's bride. The couple survived the Pacific War and lived in wealth and security until their deaths years later. See Seagrave, The Yamato Dynasty, page 92 to 94, and page 332. The thing about Nakada. See the Korean Central News Agency and Yang Song-jin cited above. Some rich Koreans managed to acquire whole lots of antiquities from Japanese dealers operating in Korea. They paid hugely inflated prices, but in this way they preserved some of Korea's patrimony. The most famous was Chung Hyung-pi, who eventually built the Kansong Art Museum to house his collection, the first private museum in Korea. You can find that in Kim, a Korean nationalist entrepreneur, A Life History of Kim Song-soo. Wow, interesting. Okay. All right, let's continue here. Before 1945, it is believed that over 6 million Korean men were forced into slave labor battalions. Of these, nearly 1 million were sent to Japan. Others were sent to the Philippines or to the Dutch East Indies to do construction work for the Japanese Army and Navy, and to dig tunnels and bunkers for war loots where they were worked to death or buried alive to hide the locations. On August 24, 1945, a group of 5,000 Korean slave laborers who had spent the war digging a major underground complex for war loot in Japan's Emori Prefecture were put aboard the warship Yukishima Maru to be, quote, taken home to Korea. The ship sailed first to Maizuru Naval Base on the west coast of Japan. There, the Koreans were sealed in the cargo holds, and the ship was taken offshore and scuttled by blowing a hole in the hull with dynamite. Out of 5,000 Koreans aboard, only 80 survived. Tokyo claimed that the Koreans locked in the hold had scuttled the ship themselves. 57 years later, 15 of these survivors and relatives of others at last won a lawsuit against the Japanese government for compensation. A court in Kyoto ruled in August 2001 that the Japanese government must pay 3 million yen, less than $30,000, to each of the plaintiffs. But the court also ruled that there was no need for the government of Japan to apologize for the incident. Aside from the 6 million Korean men dragooned as slave labor, tens of thousands of young Koreans were conscripted into the Japanese army to serve as cannon fodder in campaigns far to the south. Many ended up in Burma or New Guinea. Saddest of all were thousands of Korean girls duped into going to Japan for employment, instead ending up in brothels. It was in Korea that the Kempeitai set up its first official army brothels in 1904. These were filled with kidnapped women and girls, forerunners of hundreds of thousands of Korean women later forced to serve as comfort women in army brothels all over Asia. Koreans were targeted because it was believed that if Japanese women and girls were forced into prostitution for the army, soldiers might mutiny. The Japanese army took pains to characterize Korean women and girls as mere livestock. Mercy was in short supply. Bruce Cummings sums up the predicament. Quote, millions of people used and abused by the Japanese cannot get records on what they know to have happened to them. And thousands of Koreans who worked with the Japanese have simply erased that history as if it had never happened. End quote. Korea's tragedy can only be appreciated fully by contrast to the mellow experience of Taiwan, Japan's other new colony. Neglected by China, Taiwan had never become an independent nation, although an attempt was made in 1661 when a half Chinese, half Japanese merchant warlord called Koxinga chased away Dutch traders and set up his own domain there. Unluckily, Koxinga built his headquarters beside a mosquito-infested swamp and died a year later of cerebral malaria, his rebel kingdom collapsing. A play based on his romantic legend became popular in Japan, so many Japanese had an idealized image of Taiwan as an unspoiled paradise where they could do what they pleased. There was little resistance by native Taiwanese. Unlike Koreans, they had no ancient loathing of Japan and no experience of war. Most important, they had nothing to steal. No rich cultural patrimony built up over thousands of years, no significant artistic heritage, and a few big tombs to loot. In Japan's eagerness to turn what they renamed Formosa into a money-making venture, they made life on the island better than ever before. They rationalized its agriculture, established an efficient government, and imposed strict public order. As always, along with the army, police, and colonial administrators, came yakuza, carpetbaggers, and businessmen looking for local partners. Their chief enterprise was to set up morphine and heroin laboratories to pour drugs into Japan's mainland across the strait. By the 1930s, Taiwan also became Japan's most important staging base for the conquest of South China and Southeast Asia. Huge sums were invested to create a permanent military platform on the island. The first air fleet made its headquarters in an underground complex in Kukayama Mountain with quarters for 1,000 men. From bases on Taiwan, Japanese bombers took off to destroy America's Air Force on the ground at Clark Field in the Philippines. Conscript labor was not required of Taiwanese until the 1940s, when thousands were sent off to the Philippines as slave laborers. But Taiwan's bland experience was an exception. Korea's terrible subjugation and plunder were the norm, as millions of people in China were about to discover. End of chapter 1. Okay, so let's finish the end note in the back. I think we just have a few. Let's see here. Okay, so the thing about Yukushima, you could find that in Korea Times. Japan allegedly sunk ship carrying 5,000 Koreans. Seoul, 15 October 1999. A ruling by a Kyoto court in August 2001 granting 3 million yen to a handful of Yukushima survivors, but no apology, was reported in Mainichi Shinbun, 23 August 2001. The thing about Korean girls comfort women, why Japanese non-professional women were not forced to become sex slaves. Korean military comfort women on post-war compensation. Online max at twics.com. The thing about erased history, vanished records. You can find that in Cummings, Korea Place in the Sun, page 139. The thing about Taiwan, you'll find that in Cummings, Parallax, page 77 to 82. The thing about Kukayama Mountain, Japan First Air Fleet Headquarters. You can find that in Kodama. I Was Defeated, page 144 to 145. And then the conscript labor on Taiwan, you can find that in Cummings, Parallax, page 84. Wow, interesting. And that is the end of chapter one. Wow, what an interesting history. I think history is important. Uh, a lot of, things. The thing about war is that people loot and they try to erase history. Because if you don't have your history, if you don't have a history, you can create a new history or incorporate into other history, but you kind of lose your identity. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. Let us know what you think. Leave some comments, and we will see you next time in our next reading or our next book club, rather. Okay, bye bye now.